WWE is all about creating larger-than-life characters and unforgettable moments. But sometimes, wrestlers forget that entertainment comes first and activism comes last. From controversial tweets to public battles with management, these superstars let their woke ideology overshadow their in-ring talent. Today, we're diving into the careers that were destroyed not by lack of ability, but by an inability to keep personal politics out of professional wrestling. These are the woke wrestlers who destroyed their careers.
2 pounds, Mustafa Ali! I'll give all the credit.
On January 16, 2022, Mustafa Ali sent shockwaves through the WWE universe when he publicly requested his release from the company via Twitter. The post was brief but loaded with implications. I have a message that is much bigger than my dreams in pro wrestling. Despite my best efforts, I will not be able to deliver this message while working with WWE. Therefore, I'm requesting my release from WWE. This wasn't just a disgruntled employee asking to leave. This was a woke crusader declaring that his activism was more important than his wrestling career. Ali, a former police officer from Chicago who had worked for 4 years in law enforcement near the city, had become increasingly vocal about social justice issues, particularly following the George Floyd protests in 2020. He positioned himself as a voice for the oppressed, regularly speaking out about police brutality, systemic racism, and Islamophobia. While Ali's request was even more troubling for WWE management. According to reports from Fightful Select, Ali had only requested paternity leave in November 2021 after his wife gave birth to their 3rd child. He had been available to return to action since the first week of December, but WWE didn't use him, not even for a SmackDown taping in his hometown of Chicago. The reason became clear when details emerged about a New America gimmick that Ali had filmed for WWE. In November 2021, Ali posted a video teasing this controversial character, writing, "A few weeks ago, I made a statement that some deemed controversial. My intentions were to bring a beautiful vision to life. Unfortunately, for reasons beyond my control, I won't be able to make that vision a reality." The gimmick was initially accepted by WWE Creative before those in power changed their minds and nixed the entire idea. What followed was even worse. Vince McMahon reportedly pitched Ali an alternative gimmick that was described as something Mustafa Ali would never have done. Ali refused and went silent. When Ali met with Vince McMahon to voice his displeasure about the situation, neither man would budge. McMahon wasn't going to let a mid-card wrestler dictate creative direction, and Ali wasn't going to compromise his woke principles. The standoff resulted in Ali sitting at home, tweeting cryptically about injustice and his desire to spread a message bigger than wrestling. Just days after his release request, when reports surfaced that WWE would not grant it, Ali posted a photo from Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight showing the Joker burning a pile of money. The scene's famous line, though not included in the tweet, was clear. It's not about money, it's about sending a message. Everything burns. Ali's social media became a constant stream of complaints and social commentary, all while he remained under WWE contract collecting a paycheck but refusing to work. He posted videos of himself training, including one where he used Bryan Danielson's cattle mutilation submission hold, clearly angling for an AEW offer if he ever got released. WWE finally granted Ali his release on September 21, 2023, nearly 2 years after his initial request. Ali later admitted on the WWE After the Bell podcast that he was very comfortable talking about the situation, explaining that private conversations are meant to be private. A title that doesn't even come close to the main event status he could have achieved in WWE.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is the first ever Queen's Crown Tournament.
Speaking of putting activism before employment, Zelina Vega's firing on November 13, 2020, remains one of the most infamous examples of woke ideology clashing with corporate reality. At exactly 2:46 p.m. Pacific Time, Vega tweeted 3 words that would end her WWE career. "I support unionization." 10 minutes later, at 2:56 p.m., WWE's official account responded with their standard release statement. WWE has come to terms on the release of Zelina Vega. We wish her all the best in her future endeavors. The timing was not coincidental. Vega knew exactly what she was doing. According to PW Insider, Vega had been informed of her release in the late afternoon, meaning she fired off that pro-union tweet right before WWE could make the announcement public. It was a final act of defiance, a woke warrior's last stand against the corporate machine. The roots of Vega's departure went deeper than a single tweet. In October 2020, Vince McMahon had sent a letter to the entire roster explaining that as independent contractors, they would no longer be allowed to profit from third-party platforms like Twitch, Cameo, and OnlyFans without WWE taking a cut. Some of you are engaged with outside third parties using your name and likeness in ways that are detrimental to our company, McMahon wrote. It is imperative that these activities be terminated within the next 30 days or Friday, October 2nd. Vega, along with fellow wrestler Paige, openly defied this edict. Vega had built a substantial following on Twitch, with over 100,000 followers, and according to Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer newsletter, she was making more money from Twitch at one point than from her WWE contract. She had also launched an OnlyFans account dedicated to her cosplay hobby, not explicit content, but WWE didn't care about the distinction. Vega positioned her refusal to comply as a matter of workers' rights and artistic freedom. She framed herself as fighting for all wrestlers against WWE's exploitation, conveniently ignoring the fact that she had signed a contract agreeing to WWE's terms. Her pro-union tweet wasn't just about collective bargaining. It was about virtue signaling to the woke Twitter mob that would praise her for standing up to the evil corporation. The Screen Actors Guild's president, Gabrielle Carteris, even reached out to Vega directly after her firing, and the two had what they called a powerful conversation about unionization. Vega tweeted back, "Very powerful indeed. Thank you all for the pleasant conversation and insight." She was playing the role of the brave activist who sacrificed her career for the greater good, and the woke community ate it up. But here's the truth that Vega didn't want to admit. She wasn't that important. She had been Andrade's manager before breaking off to pursue singles competition, and her singles run had gained no momentum. WWE probably would have released her during one of their budget cuts anyway, but Vega's defiance and public support for unionization gave them the perfect excuse to make an example of her. The message was clear to the rest of the roster. Defy us and promote unions, and you're gone. Remarkably, streaming on Twitch, stopped talking about unions, and accepted WWE's terms completely. All that brave talk about workers' rights evaporated the moment she needed a paycheck. She went on to win the Queen of the Ring tournament and later captured the Women's United States Championship, proving that she could have had success all along if she had just kept her woke politics to herself. Vega's story shows that standing up for your principles only lasts as long as you can afford it, and when the mortgage is due, principles become negotiable. While Vega eventually returned, some wrestlers never recovered from their woke activism. On December 31st, 2021, just hours after her AEW contract expired and wasn't renewed,
What are your thoughts on Big Swole?
a wrestler named Big Swole gave an interview that would effectively end her career in major wrestling promotions. She criticized AEW's lack of diversity and representation. So the company does lack diversity, and there's no one who looks like me that can give me advice or knows what I'm going through, Swole said. Tony Khan's response was swift and devastating. He took to Twitter and publicly destroyed her. "I don't think she was going anywhere in AEW because she wasn't good enough," Khan wrote before defending AEW's diversity record. It was a brutal, unprecedented public burial of a former employee. Khan didn't just disagree with her assessment. He attacked her ability as a wrestler, essentially saying she was released because she sucked, not because of any diversity issues. The wrestling community erupted. Some supported Big Swole for speaking out about legitimate concerns regarding representation. Others felt she was bitter about not being renewed and was weaponizing diversity as an excuse for her own shortcomings. Wrestling journalist Dave Meltzer even got involved, adding his own analysis that seemed to side with Khan's assessment of her in-ring work. The truth is that Big Swole made a catastrophic miscalculation. She thought that by framing her release as a diversity issue, she would pressure AEW into bringing her back, or at least damage their reputation enough to feel vindicated. Instead, Khan called her bluff and exposed her as a mediocre talent trying to use woke talking points to mask her own deficiencies. Whether AEW actually has diversity problems or not became irrelevant. The narrative became, Big Swole wasn't good enough, got fired, and blamed it on racism. After Khan's response, no major promotion wanted to touch her. She was radioactive, a potential lawsuit waiting to happen. Someone who might turn on her employer publicly and accuse them of discrimination the moment things didn't go her way. Big Swole faded into obscurity, wrestling on the independent circuit for small crowds. A cautionary tale about what happens when you try to fight a billionaire using social justice rhetoric. The common thread connecting all these stories is a fundamental misunderstanding of what professional wrestling is. It's not a platform for social activism. It's not a place to champion workers' rights or fight systemic oppression. It's entertainment. It's a business designed to make money by creating compelling characters and storylines that audiences want to watch. When wrestlers prioritize their woke ideology over their job performance, they make themselves unemployable. Companies don't want talent who will publicly criticize them or create controversy. They want wrestlers who show up, do what they're told, and help the company make money. Consider the case of Sasha Banks and Naomi, who on May 16, 2022, during a taping of Monday Night Raw in Norfolk, Virginia, walked out of the show after being informed they would compete in a six-pack challenge to determine the #1 contender for Bianca Belair's Raw Women's Championship. Banks and Naomi were the reigning WWE Women's Tag Team Champions at the time, but instead of following through with the match, they walked into WWE Head of Talent Relations John Laurinaitis' office with their suitcases in hand, placed their tag team championship belts on his desk, and walked out of the arena. WWE immediately announced the walkout on air, with commentators explaining that Banks and Naomi had surrendered the titles. The company later suspended both wrestlers indefinitely and stripped them of the championships. The official reason given was that Banks and Naomi felt disrespected as tag team champions and were uncomfortable working with two of their scheduled opponents, Doudrop and Nikki ASH, despite having wrestled them before without incident. But reports from Fightful Select revealed the real story. Banks and Naomi wanted to defend their tag titles at the upcoming Hell in a Cell Premium Live event against Doudrop and Nikki ASH. Their pitch was rejected. They also pitched having Doudrop and Nikki interfere in Naomi's planned match against Belair to set up a future tag title defense. That pitch was also rejected. WWE had other plans. Naomi was supposed to win the six-pack challenge by pinning Nikki ASH, earning a shot at Belair's title. Banks was reportedly being set up for a SmackDown Women's Championship match against Ronda Rousey at Hell in a Cell. Both women would have put over the singles champions at the pay-per-view, meaning their tag title reign would have been sidelined indefinitely. Here's where the woke element comes in. Banks and Naomi didn't just have a creative disagreement. They framed their walkout as standing up for the women's tag team division and for being respected as champions. They positioned themselves as fighting against WWE's pattern of devaluing women's wrestling and using tag titles as afterthoughts. In their minds, they were taking a principled stand for women's rights within the company. In reality, they were two entitled performers who threw a tantrum when they didn't get their way. The locker room didn't support them. None of the wrestlers Sports Illustrated spoke to believed that Banks and Naomi actually felt unsafe with any of their opponents, as WWE's statement had claimed. They all agreed that walking out was unprofessional and came with negative consequences. Banks and Naomi sat at home for months, collecting paychecks but not working. Their contracts didn't expire until the end of 2022, meaning they couldn't go anywhere else. Eventually, WWE released them, and Banks went to New Japan Pro Wrestling as Mercedes Moné, before ultimately signing with AEW. Naomi went to Impact Wrestling, where she won the TNA Knockouts World Championship. Both women later framed their decisions as empowering stands against mistreatment, but the wrestling industry saw it differently. They were performers who put their egos ahead of their responsibilities, and it took years for them to rebuild their reputations. Naomi eventually returned to WWE in January 2024, quietly and without fanfare, accepting whatever creative she was given. Banks, now Mercedes Moné, is in AEW, where she's positioned as a top star. But her WWE prime years were wasted because she couldn't accept that tag team titles weren't as important as she wanted them to be.
Ryback ready for action. He takes on the Wyatt family's Eric Rowan next.
Even male wrestlers aren't immune to woke career suicide. Ryback, once positioned as WWE's next monster babyface, destroyed his own career by becoming a pseudo-intellectual activist for wrestler pay equity. During his WWE run from 2012 to 2016, Ryback was initially pushed hard, receiving massive crowd reactions and being positioned in main events against CM Punk and John Cena. He had the look, the intensity, and the crowd support to be a long-term main eventer. But as his push faded and he was moved down the card, Ryback became increasingly bitter about WWE's business practices, specifically regarding wrestler compensation and healthcare. The breaking point came in 2016 when Ryback refused to sign a new contract and wrote a lengthy blog post criticizing WWE's pay structure. He argued that all wrestlers should be paid equally regardless of their position on the card, a fundamentally socialist idea that ignored basic economics and market value. Ryback framed himself as fighting for the little guy, standing up against WWE's exploitation of talent. He positioned his equal pay proposal as a moral imperative, suggesting that everyone from the main eventers to the enhancement talent deserved the same paycheck because they were all risking their bodies. It was textbook woke thinking: prioritize equality of outcome over merit, and demonize anyone who points out that your ideas don't make economic sense. Ryback expected that when he left WWE, other promotions would line up to sign him. Instead, he found himself largely shut out of major wrestling companies. Part of this was his reputation for being difficult to work with, but the larger issue was his constant public criticism of the wrestling business. After leaving WWE, Ryback launched a podcast called Conversation with the Big Guy, where he regularly attacked Vince McMahon, Triple H, CM Punk, and various other wrestlers and executives. He positioned himself as a truth-teller fighting the system, exposing the exploitation and unfairness of professional wrestling. Every interview, every podcast episode, every social media post became an opportunity to bash WWE and promote his agenda about how wrestling should be run. He talked about workers' rights, fair pay, healthcare, and all the progressive talking points that play well with the woke crowd but make you unemployable in a cutthroat business. Promoters don't want to hire someone who might turn on them publicly the moment things don't go their way. They don't want wrestlers who view themselves as activists first and performers second. Ryback made himself radioactive in the industry. Today, Ryback is selling supplements and making occasional independent wrestling appearances, a far cry from the WWE main events he once competed in. He still hasn't learned his lesson, continuing to position himself as a martyr who was blackballed for speaking truth to power, when in reality he was just a wrestler who let his ego and woke ideology destroy his career. The pattern is clear across all these cases. These wrestlers had talent, they had opportunities, they had platforms to become stars, but they prioritized their woke activism, their need to be seen as brave truth-tellers fighting against oppression, over the basic professional requirement of doing their jobs and making their employers money. They confused professional wrestling with political activism, and they paid the ultimate price. Mustafa Ali could have been a main eventer if he had focused on his craft instead of his message. Zelina Vega could have had a longer, more successful first run if she had complied with WWE's policies instead of championing unionization. Big Swole could still be in AEW if she had accepted her release quietly instead of crying discrimination. Sasha Banks and Naomi could have remained WWE's top tag team if they had been patient and worked with creative instead of walking out. Ryback could still be a WWE star if he had accepted his position on the card instead of demanding equal pay for unequal value. The wrestling industry has always been ruthless to those who step out of line, and the rise of woke culture has only made it worse. Now, instead of just being difficult or unprofessional, wrestlers can frame themselves as victims of systemic injustice, fighting for representation, workers' rights, and social change. They can turn their firings into martyrdom, their creative frustrations into discrimination, their ego into activism. And for a moment, the woke Twitter mob will celebrate them as heroes. But the applause fades quickly, and what remains is a destroyed career and a reputation for being difficult to work with. The entertainment value they could have provided is replaced by the political statements they felt compelled to make, and the fans who might have cheered for them are turned off by the constant virtue signaling. None of this is to say that wrestlers shouldn't have opinions, or that companies should be able to exploit their talent without consequence. But there's a time and place for everything, and a WWE ring is not a platform for social activism. When you're under contract to a wrestling promotion, your job is to entertain, to make the company money, and to be a team player. If you have grievances, handle them privately. If you have causes you care about, champion them on your own time using your own platform. But don't confuse your employer's business with your personal mission to change the world. The wrestlers we've discussed today all made that mistake. They let their woke ideology convince them that they were more important than the companies they worked for, that their messages were more valuable than their matches, that their activism was worth sacrificing their careers. They were wrong, and they paid the price. Which of these career-ending decisions shocked you the most? Do you think any of these wrestlers were justified in their actions, or did they get exactly what they deserved? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section. And before you leave, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Ring Rivals so you don't miss the next ones.